In the last video, we talked about the basics of epithelial tissue. So now let's kind of dive in and talk about how you can recognize the different types of epithelial tissue on your test that your professor will probably give you. One of the things that we said about epithelial tissue was that it's named two different ways. It's named according to how many cell layers thick it is. It can be either simple with one cell layer thick or stratified with more than one cell layer thick. And it's named according to the way that the cells are shaped. So it could be a squamous cell, which is flat, cuboidal cell, which is a cube, or columnar cell, which is a column. And sometimes there's a special case where it's pseudostratified, where it's like a fake different layers, but they're all found on the same basement membrane. So let's talk about quickly how we tell these things apart for your lab test. The first one is simple squamous. Remember, squamous means squished, and I always draw it kind of flat to remind myself and my students that it does mean it's kind of flat like a pancake. These are in a single layer, hence it's simple, and they're found lining your blood vessels in your heart, and their job is just diffusion. So when you look at them under the microscope, they are going to be very flat like a pancake. You'll be able to see the nucleus, and the nucleus will be the same shape as the cell. So we can tell that these cells are kind of a flattened mess. And then there's an underlying basement membrane to all of these things. So they're attached to something. So when you see them and they're completely flat, that's simple squamous. These are the ones that you'll see if your professor has you scrape the inside of your mouth with a toothpick and put it on a microscope slide and stain it. Those are simple squamous epithelial cells that you will see. Simple columnar is our next one. We know from the name that it's going to be one cell layer thick, so it's simple, and they're going to be column shaped, so they'll be taller than they are wide. And these sometimes will have a goblet cell, and those goblet cells, their job is to secrete mucus. So you're going to find these lining your digestive tract because you have to have that mucus for the waste and the food to make it through your digestive tract. And their job is to absorb and secrete. So here's an example, a close-up example of a simple columnar tissue slide. You can see that it's much taller than it is wide, so it makes a simple column. Simple cuboidal is next. Simple, we know that it's one cell layer high, and cuboidal, we know it's shaped like a cube. So it's the same height and width, and it's attached to, in this slide sample, you can see the basement membrane that runs through there. And so you can see that they're little cubes that are stacked all along, and their job, of course, is to secrete and absorb. Another columnar cell which you may have on your exam are ciliated columnar. We know that cilia helps to move things along, and so these are found lining your respiratory tract and the oviducts to move the egg. Their job, of course, is to secrete and absorb, so you can pretty much put that for all of the function for all of these and pretty much get it right. But your ciliated columnar, you can see these tall cells. Look at the shape of the nucleus, and it'll show you that this cell is elongated, so you can tell that it's a column. The last type of simple epithelial cell is pseudostratified. It's probably my favorite. It's the one that has the fake layers. You can see that all of these cells over here are attached to this basement membrane, but if you look at the nuclei, you can see that the nuclei are all at different heights. You can tell that they're elongated, so you can tell that it's probably a column kind of shape, but you can also tell that they're not all in a line. So these are pseudostratified. And they're found lining your respiratory tract and also in the male reproductive tract. But these are the ones that have the fake layers. That's why I always write it like that, because they have the same structure across the basement membrane, but the cells are different heights. Quick review of simple epithelial. Simple squamous are the squished. Simple cuboidal are the cubes. Simple columnar are the columns. Now let's talk about the stratified epithelial tissue samples. The first one we're going to talk about is stratified squamous. It's written like this because the top cell layers are the squamous cells, which are flattened or squished. The basal layer that's attached to your basement membrane are either going to be cubes or they're going to be columns. And in this sample, I kind of drew on it a little bit for you so that you could sort of see. You see there's a lot of cell layers. Most of these are going to be little cubes, but at the very top, you have these across the top that are flattened. And once again, if you have trouble trying to figure out what kind of cell you're looking at, look at the nucleus. These are round nuclei, so you can tell they're kind of a cube shaped. These are flattened nuclei, so you can tell that they're a squamous cell. This job of this stratified squamous is to protect you. The next stratified one we're going to talk about is the stratified cuboidal. This one is rare. It's usually only 2 layers, so you have 2 layers of cubes attached to a basement membrane. A lot of times the slide that you'll see for this for your lab quiz is going to be one taken from the sweat glands, because these are found in the sweat glands and also the conjunctiva of the eye. Its job is to secrete and to protect. I sort of drew on this one for you so you could sort of visualize. And so you can see that it kind of runs together a little bit, but if you look at the shape of the nuclei, you can tell that these nuclei are circular. And so you know if it's a circle, then it's going to be a cube, say a shaped cell. So you can kind of tell that these are 2 cubes stacked on top of each other. Our next stratified one is stratified columnar. This one is fairly rare. It can be ciliated, and it's in the male reproductive tract. I drew on this sample for you so you could visualize it a little bit better. You can see that these are round nuclei, so these are cubes at the bottom, and then these are elongated nuclei at the top, so these are column cells at the top. So that's one way to be able to kind of visualize that one a little bit better. This one's a little bit hard to see in the lab. Final stratified sample are your transitional ones. These are rounded cells. These are usually pretty easy to recognize on your lab exam, because when you look at the outline of the top of these, you can see they look like bubbles. And it goes along perfectly with their job, which is to stretch. These are found in your urinary organs, so it's important that they have some stretch going on. But you can tell where I drew on these that the cells are bubbled up and you have almost a teardrop shaped nucleus to them. But this one's easy if you'll just look at the boundary of the cells and you can see that they look like bubbles. Quick review of stratified. The stratified squamous, the outer layer is squished with cubes or columns underneath attached to your basement membrane. Stratified cuboidal are 2 layers of cubes attached to your basement membrane. Stratified columnar, you have the base that are cubes and the top are columns, and then your transitional, which is the easier one, which has rounded cells, and they're pretty easy. I hope this is helpful for your studying. Epithelial tissue can get confusing, but it's not as difficult as you're afraid it is. So as long as you get some of these tips and apply those, I think you'll be able to figure it out. Good luck with your studies.